Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the LayerX podcast. My name is Eyal Arazi. I'm head of product marketing here at LayerX, and today we're continuing our exploration of the future of browser security and cybersecurity in general, and how it relates to the future of browsing. Today, we are joined by a special guest. We're joined by Francis Odom. Francis is the founder of Software Analyst Cyber Research. He's an independent cybersecurity researcher who is regularly read by over 60,000 security and technology professionals. He covers a range of different topics, but especially focuses, first of all, on security itself, but especially on identity, data security, cloud security, and so on. He publishes some very thorough long-form research on his website, but he's also very active on social media, especially on Twitter, or X as it is known nowadays. So Francis, first of all, thank you for joining us today. And maybe before we dive in, could you give us a few words about your own background and the research you're doing?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me again, and super happy to be here and just exchange ideas together with you. I'm Francis. Thank you for the kind introduction as well. Yes, my background has originally been in data, actually, product management. I started my career in and around data product management, and then over the years, evolved over to cybersecurity. And in cybersecurity, specifically, started with the learning of CrowdStrike as a solution, and then evolving that over to, share my ideas online on the internet of what I was learning, and just quite frankly, follow my curiosity. And lo and behold, the internet did its thing. People started to gravitate towards my work, and here we go, and evolved it naturally into an analyst firm that just happened to come naturally and organically because companies wanted my advice. Companies wanted me to share briefings with them, and companies really wanted to always be in my reports and write up. And so I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, that's pretty much my background. But yes, I've covered and specialized primarily in the data security and AI security market. That's one of my core areas of specialization. Obviously, I follow closely and track the network security as well as enterprise browser market as well, some of which we'll have conversations about. Cover adjacent markets like identity, security operations, as well as cloud and application security as areas of specialization.
Yeah, and as you said, it's really remarkable how you've gained traction, especially over the last year and a half or so, and really gotten a very large following. But also in terms of the range of topics that you cover, that on the one hand, we see them as kind of these distinct, almost silos of identity, data, AI, infrastructure, network, and so on. But in practice, more and more they're also blending into each other. And at least from my experience, I see, sometimes companies appearing on multiple kind of assessments that you do, kind of just in different aspects. And they're of course doing the exact same thing. So
Absolutely.
please, God.
No, please no, finish up.
No, so what I was about to say is indeed one of the areas that you covered is the browser security market. And I think that just over 1 year ago, I think it was October of 23, I might be fuzzy on the date, but I think around that time, you published a very thorough investigation of the browser security market of enterprise browsers and browser extensions, in which, of course, LayerX was also featured. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So, in the year plus that has passed since then, uh, what has changed? How has the market developed?
Uh, if I had to summarize it, maybe only a little bit has changed. I'm just joking. Obviously, there's a lot has evolved, as you know, the pace at which technology is moving, and even cybersecurity in and of itself is really rapidly growing. Sometimes it feels like, wow, like it's only been about what, 13 months, and it actually does feel like I wrote that like 5 years ago. Like genuinely speaking, sometimes just because so much has happened. But yes, there are a few things, and I could maybe go over a few things. I think number one is AI. I mean, obviously, that's like the number one type of conversation we've heard in terms of how these enterprise browser security vendors are actually able to secure and address Gen AI security risk. I think that's increasingly become a key thing. Is that obviously AI has existed since 2022 with open AI and whatnot, but I think gradually 2024 was really a year where we started to really think about the risk associated. I think 2022, 2023 was all about excitement, about we have this new technology, it's going to do all of this fancy and amazing things. And then 2024 was okay, now we now start have to really think about, well, what is the risk with AI and Gen AI? And I think a key role that enterprise browser security vendors are having to have had to address. I mean, relative to when I wrote the report, relative to where we're at today on the market, is being able to address that. Right? I think that's just one, but obviously there are other things. I think we talk about areas like data security and data loss prevention. Um, prevention of web threat detection. How do we do those better? I think that's one. I think number two, quite frankly, I think there's been an adoption. There's been a more awareness of the role that enterprise browsers actually do play on the market, and extensions in it of itself. I think we just have greater awareness about these solutions as being able to actually centralize a number of different security solutions into a platform. And I think the case of this becoming a platform is becoming to resonate. Obviously, it's still not widely on the market, but it's beginning to obviously resonate. I think a third piece to that will be around RBI. Obviously, we talk a lot about past technologies like VDI type technologies. And so, but RBI has seen obviously it's obviously slowly beginning to fade, if you want to call it, just due to performance and the cost that could be associated with some of these technologies, as well as just adoption levels. I think, yeah, users are looking for things that are a lot more native, and just quite frankly, able to adopt to modern technologies. I think that those are one. And then I think the last piece to this is just more the evolving role of SASE and SSE, which we could talk about later on, as like what do we want to about what's evolving and changing in that market. But long term, I think the long story short is enterprise browsers are becoming a key platform, or they're shaping up to become platform potential in terms of being able to deal with Gen AI risk, DLP use cases, web protection, and a number of other security protocols.
So it's really interesting that you mentioned a number of different threads or aspects, and this also really mirrors a lot of what we're also seeing in the market. First of all, Gen AI is driving a lot of demand when it comes to browser security, and we can talk about it, especially in the face of the limitations of SASE and SSE, and maybe we can pursue that topic in a bit. But that's just one element of it. But as you point out, DLP is also huge because if the web really is the primary channel through which organizations, communicate and share data, then it's also really the number one point of risk for data security. So DLP in that regard is huge. And you mentioned RBI, and of course, what one of the key knocks against RBI is the performance issue and the impact on the user experience and how it breaks websites, slows things down, and so on, which is really important, not from a technology's point of view, but just from a user experience point of view of users wanting to go about and do their thing without interruption. And exactly as you say, and this is something we're seeing a kind of a consolidation of a number of different use cases into really what is slowly turning into a platform. So kind of moving on and touching on that thread, one of the one of the key questions that a lot of times, we hear and we're also compared against is, well, I have a SASE or have an SSE solution. Why do I need a browser security solution? Or maybe I'm considering, if it's a smaller organization, maybe I'm considering a SASE. What are the pros and cons versus browser security? So how do you see that shift in the market with regards to SASE and SSE?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question because I track both of this market. But number one, I think anyone who knows SASE or SSE, I mean, these are very complex technologies. These are extremely complex, difficult, with a lot of infrastructure required with them. And quite frankly, and I think I've done a lot of coverage. I think some of my most popular reports from about 2022, early 2023 actually were around the SASE market. And so people know about even some of the long implementation timelines and just complexities that some of these solutions. I think that's one. I think number two, you have a challenge in and around the case of visibility into more narrow or like a lot more granular user activity that some of these solutions do have that they do lack. I think that's one. I think another piece too is just the limitations in which these solutions have around SaaS visibility and control. So you've actually seen some of these vendors actually make acquisitions to increase some of their SaaS um, visibility, especially for enterprises in which they're actually maybe working with. I think number four to that also is just some of the other performance concerns that some of these solutions actually have in terms of latency or degrading user experience, because usually SaaS is this connection between networking and security. So there's a big networking component to it, and so you do have a lot of issues around latency, and then obviously it's expensive. I mean, this goes to the first point I mentioned around complexity. This is extremely expensive, and organizations are just like, because usually SaaS is a combination of different types of technology, CASB, SD-WAN, ZTNA, and then obviously maybe some firewall as a service. Usually those are the core components, and these are individual functionality. And so there's just scalability cost and concern. So when you think about all of those challenges and limitations, it only limits you to a subset of enterprises. So the largest of the largest enterprises are the ones who might say, hey, you know what, maybe they have lots of branch offices across the globe, or whatever, that might say, hey, we need this. But you know what? For a big part of the market, 80 to about 90% of the market, they don't need something as complex and as large. Then I think that's where we have the opportunity of where enterprise browsers still provide you with a lot of those same capabilities. Obviously, not to the large extent, but I think for an
Mhm.
SMB and mid-market accounts, you have everything you want for less cost, less complexity, faster time for deployments, and then even much more granular visibility into users. And I think those are some of the aspects that I see an opportunity for extension browsers fixing in the gaps that some of your traditional SSC vendors are. And quite frankly, I mean, I also, because of my wide breadth of coverage across many
Mhm.
cybersecurity markets,
Mhm.
one thing I will actually say is the SASE market is seeing a slowdown. Like every other market I track, identity, data security, AI, and all the security operations, every one of these market are seeing new areas emerging or new growth areas in identity NHIs, right? In security operations, we have this role of AI in the SOC. I could go on and on, but in SASE and SSE, it's been very rare. And so this whole, because SSE and SASE was built around the network and the perimeter and being the core of everything, I think that whole narrative is going down, and we're actually seeing a slowdown in that market generally.
That's a really interesting observation, what you just pointed out about the contrast between pretty much every aspect of cybersecurity, AI security, identity security, data security, that are seeing, either an explosion or an evolution, maybe like cloud security, things like that, where, cloud security today is very different than what it was 5 years ago, but, it's an evolving market. But when you look at network security or the traditional network security and SASE and SSE, uh, and this is our impression as well, it's kind of plateaued over the last 12 or 18 months. And indeed, what we're seeing, what we're hearing from a lot of our customers, especially, as you pointed out, is kind of that tension between coverage and complexity. where it's very difficult to get with a network level, solution of, for example, SSE, full coverage of all of the, endpoint, or things that happen at the endpoint or things that happen within a browsing session. So that's when you start having, very complex interfaces and connectors and APIs, and you have to deploy agents. So, and you do have some of the more sophisticated SSEs out there that do provide that functionality, but it really gets complex and it really is difficult to deploy, and it really starts getting in the way of the user experience. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head, so to speak, on kind of the limitations that SASE is kind of coming up against. And this mirrors a lot of what we're also hearing from our customers and in the market in general as well. So, building on that and segueing more to browser security itself, what do you see are the the main use cases that will be the pillars for browser security? I mean, you mentioned GenAI. Do you see that as the big driver? Sorry, or are there other additional use cases as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think right now some of the biggest, obviously, as much as there's already a lot of hype on AI and the role that plays, and I don't want to further accentuate that. I think obviously, companies are still they want to leverage AI to obviously as a competitive advantage. They want to be able to. I think this is what I see for my own research is in the early days of ChatGPT and quite frankly, even to like early 2024, companies are like, we're just going to outrightly just ban any ChatGPT access within our enterprise. And like, we're not even going to try to use it. And I think eventually companies started to realize, you know what, like this could actually make my employees 10 times faster. This could improve a lot of productivity. This could be a competitive advantage. And now they're like, okay, how do we go about securely using AI within our enterprise? But
And,
obviously,
and by
that
the way,
means
friends,
you.
just to touch on that, we're recording this in late January 2025, and Google has just in the last week or so started to roll out its Gemini integration into Google Workspace. So, Google Workspace customers, if you're using, at a professional level, if you're using Gmail and Google Docs, or the Google Workspace suite, it's literally pushed directly to your end users. And even though you can turn it off technically, on through the admin panel, it's right there. There's no way around it.
Absolutely, absolutely, exactly, and so that's exactly what you have now, whether it's Microsoft or Google Workspace, and I think that's a very good example. What we're talking about now, you're going to be using a lot of AI tools in Word, Excel, and it's going to be going through what. And obviously, the problem and the challenges is now you have enterprise data, you have proprietary data that has to work and interact with AI, and especially or employees are using ChatGPT and they might have to put in specific types of sensitive informations and whatnot. And companies are like, how do we have the right controls? And I think so. Number one use case obviously has to be around how does um, obviously browser security now has a very pivotal role to play in terms of managing ChatGPT access, whether it's putting controls in place around copy and paste or data inputs into ChatGPT, because everyone wants to use it and companies want their employees actually,
Mhm.
if they know it's going to make them faster, it's going to make them more productive, it's going to drive outcomes, but they just want to be able to have controls and policies in place in terms of prevention. And I think this is actually a good opportunity, quite frankly, for enterprise browser companies. Because guess what? For I don't know what the official stat shows, but a large part of everyone uses ChatGPT on the browser level, right? Like no one necessarily has an application. Almost everyone is at the browser level. And guess what?
Mhm.
The browser extension companies are perfectly positioned right there to be able to
Mhm.
manage that. And
Absolutely.
so I do think this is a big market, and I think this is going to be a big use case study going forward. But building upon that, also, I think there are areas of identity also that could be used here as well. In terms of being able to manage and guard what is the identity, who has access to what, and what are the different controls you have around that. I think there's a role here for enterprise browser security companies to do play a role here. Another piece, obviously, is the data leak prevention. I did a big report on this actually just last month, so it's very fresh on my mind in terms of how enterprises are also trying to prevent data leak, or understanding who has accessed what types of data, or who's trying to download specific sensitive data, maybe from SaaS apps onto their private workspaces, or who's trying to maybe make use of enterprise type data. Obviously, some of these connects to Gen AI, but obviously we still these are still foundational components to how data is used. And so I think that's one. And then lastly, obviously, I think is also a big piece is just web security. Everything happens, a big part of enterprise work happens on the browser. I think there's opportunity for browser security players to play a role there because they're right at the browser layer and they could actually stop or protect against whatever types of attacks or breaches are actually happening right at the point of contact.
Absolutely. And indeed, that mirrors a lot of what we're also seeing from our end commercially. I'll just add one thing on top of it that we're starting to see more and more, which is the issue of malicious browser extensions, which up to now has been kind of at the periphery of concerns when it comes to browser security. But over the last, 6 to 12 months, we've seen a real uptick in interest over it, and this really culminated right at the end of 2024 with the attack campaign that has become known as the Cyberhaven breach. Although Cyberhaven was just one victim out of 30 or 40 different extensions that were compromised, but it just goes to illustrate the risks that are there and kind of the potential for damages for organizations and the need for security. So, you know, what you've outlined so far makes a lot of sense in terms of, again, what we're also seeing. So, kind of looking ahead, and we're in January right now, so it's the time of the year where everybody makes forecasts for the rest of the year. What, in your view, what is it going to take to be successful for vendors to be successful in this market? And what are the critical capabilities, so to speak, that they're going to need in order to really make an impact at a market level?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I continue to really believe data security, data and Gen AI use cases. Obviously, I do see that as a big market opportunity, and I do think right now a lot of companies are struggling. On one hand, the visibility side of where is my data, who has access to what, how is it going in and out of the organization, and they want to be able to just understand how enterprise did it. And I think lots of companies are still struggling with that. And obviously, there's a different kind of market category around DSPM that does some of those visibility side. But then there's also the DLP side of things where I do think companies really want to have their ability to stop data from exfiltrating or moving out of the organization, or they
Mhm.
want to be able to see what's going in and out. So I do think any vendor who's really able to tell this story to enterprise, whether it's a data leader, whether it's the security operations team, or whatever team within the organization, and tell this story of they have the best capabilities around seeing data that's going in, out, stopping and enforcing specific protocols and policies has to definitely will be a winner. And being able to then build off that to say, hey, we could help you with all of your Gen AI type use cases, because I think this is also going to be a year where enterprises continue to adopt more of these AI tools, or think about how they want to leverage AI within the enterprise. And I think that's just going to be, if you want to think about it as more of kind of a horizontal type use case in terms of ways of thinking. I think that's one. I think a second piece, companies are still struggling with SaaS security in general. I continue to see that as a core need in general, and I think browser security companies being able to fit their narrative into how they actually help companies prevent shadow access and give them good visibility into 360, because that's the problem with SaaS applications is you don't really know what's happening there, who's using what, who's downloading what, and so being able to show that. I also think obviously now kind of like bringing all of these together in a
Mhm.
way, you need to be able to create the platform story. You need to be able to tell a CISO that, hey, you
Yeah,
know
that's really
what?
big.
I could cut down the cost. I could help you cut down either the cost or maybe not having to use a lot of other identity type tools, or I need to buy another data security tool. I need to have another identity type security. Being able to tell the story of, hey, in our own platform solution or as our browser security platform, we're actually able to help you with these use cases around data identity and SaaS, and being able to tell that story, and that helps cut down costs, and which is essentially a platform story that you could tell a story that at the browser layer, I could help your enterprise solve many of these problems and pitch that as a platform. I think that's going to be a big compelling part. But obviously, before you get to a platform, you need to solve a number of these use cases, and then you need to be able to tell that as a story. And at the end of it, it ultimately comes down to reducing the costs, which is where the platform comes, and then reducing complexities or fragmentation. Because as we all know, point solutions are all over the enterprise today. I mean, there's no shortage of point solutions or new companies emerging out of the market these days.
No, I mean, to touch on that last point, I think a lot of organizations, especially at the higher end, are kind of fed up with having, so many vendors and so many solutions. And I've heard customers talking about, I will not introduce another vendor unless I can take out, another one. And I think that is exactly where the platform play comes into effect, because there's still a question out there in the market of, feature play versus platform play, and you have a lot of companies and a lot of vendors that are going on, being a dedicated, Gen AI or identity or, SaaS player. And, all of them ultimately are leveraging a browser extension as the means of doing it. But, and that might get you, foot in the door. But when an organization will come uh and look at you and assess it, it's going to say, how can it solve, our problems at a bigger scale. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And then one last thing, maybe we need just very briefly to touch on is just, I think also when we also think about making a compelling case or necessary, it also means we also have to think about risk
Mhm.
associated with
Mhm.
the market. And I think obviously
Important
a
word.
fundamental risk, I think just to a feeling to like, hey, if you obviously we just talked about the things you need to be successful as a platform or as a vendor in this market, but that also means addressing risk. And I think some of the other risk is around the coverage or dealing with other like obviously fundamentally you're built around Chromium. If you're dealing with Chromium in this case, or you're dealing with like Windows or whatever, and that creates a reliance, if you want to call it, or a dependence on the underlying architecture. So I think being able to provide that good coverage and reducing redundability across those different solutions, I think as long as you could avoid that risk, is going to be a key part of who's going to be also very successful in this market.
Yeah, that's a really important point. That's a really important point, about that, about risk and risk mitigation. So Francis, we're coming up on time and want to make sure that, we're respectful both of your and the audience's time. So, some final words. Where do you see this market going next in the next year or so?
I see I continue to see this market to grow. I continue to absolutely see this market. There's a lot of opportunity for this. And yeah, I mean, how big, how fast, I don't know. If I had a magic one, I would do it. But again, I think AI and this problem around data, it was because data is the foundation of AI, obviously, and being able to help. And the biggest security problem is understanding what's going in and out, and a big part of ChatGPT, which has quite frankly transformed the enterprise, is at the browser layer. At least it's
Mhm.
still leveraged at the browser. And so I do think this is causing people to just rethink browser security again. And I just see this really being a turning point for this market, quite frankly. And I think it's up to the vendors in the market right now. Obviously, companies like LayerX have a lot of really good use cases as it comes to. I really love the features and capabilities you guys have around ChatGPT access, obviously actions in ChatGPT and whatnot. And I think this is really an opportunity to upsell those modules. So yes, I don't have a magic one, but I do think data and AI creates a really compelling case for your market.
Okay, fantastic. So, Francis Odom, thank you so much for your time today. And for listeners who are interested in reading some more research, your website is at softwareanalyst.substack.com, correct?
That's
Or do you
correct.
have other websites? And of course, you're active on social media, LinkedIn and X. Before we wrap up, let me just say a few words on LayerX for listeners who may not be familiar with us. So LayerX is an agentless browser security platform that integrates with any browser to secure the enterprise from really all web-borne threats and browsing risks that endpoint and network solutions can't provide protection against today. And of course, this includes, for example, data leakage over web channels, SaaS, GenAI risks, browser extensions, and so on. And the way we see it is that the browser now is the main work interface in most organizations, which is also making it the main point of risk for cyber attacks. But as we've outlined throughout this conversation, legacy security solutions such as CASB, web gateways, endpoint solutions, and so on are blind to in-browser user activity, which leaves organizations in many times exposed, which is why you need a dedicated browser-based solution to protect you against these emerging threats. LayerX is delivered as an enterprise browser extension, so we seamlessly integrate with any common or uncommon browser. On the front end and on the back end, we integrate with pretty much any IDP solution, which enables organizations to really seamlessly integrate us and address their most critical use cases, including GenAI security, SaaS security, identity security, DLP, zero-hour web vulnerabilities, phishing, malicious browser extensions, and much more. If you're interested, we invite you to learn more about LayerX at our website, layerxsecurity.com. So, Francis, thanks again for joining us today. Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for listening, and we hope to see you at or hear you at another LayerX podcast. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye bye.